Hello and good afternoon. My name is Jonnie Wilson, and welcome to our series called Breaking the Silence in the Black Community. Again, I'm Jonnie Wilson. I'm a sexual assault and outreach counselor for the Hays-Caldwell Women's Center. In our panel today, we will discuss the myth of the strong Black woman, and we're just happy to have you here. But before we get started, let me first thank our sponsors. The first sponsor is Hays-Caldwell Women's Center, empowering survivors of abuse for over 40 years in the community. The next is the Dunbar Heritage Association in San Marcos. And the last but not least is NAMI of Central Texas. Thank you for sponsoring us today. So now I will let my co-host, Ms. Vanessa Westbrooks, to go ahead and introduce our panel.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon as we have I believe, a very productive presentation. I'm going to introduce the names of our panelists. And panelists, as I call your name, would you please just kind of wave into the camera just a little bit. First, we have Dr. Delia Gillis.
Hi, everybody.
And we have Pastor Jonafa Banbury. We have Dr. Now I practice your name 8 times. Is it Queverra? Queverra Moten. And we have Miss Latonya Henry. We have Miss Ramika Adams. We have Miss Claudette Blythe. And we have Miss Sandra Organ. And of course, myself, Vanessa Westbrooks. And we will be the panelists discussing questions that we'll bring up, and you'll be able to enjoy and engage in the interaction that we're about to undertake. Tony, back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Westbrook. So our topic today is the myth of the strong Black woman. And today we're going to put this in historical context. And when I think about putting it in historical context, I think about Patricia Hill Collins in her book entitled The Black Politics, Sexual Politics of African Americans, Gender and New Racism. She argues that the historical patterns of oppression are recreated in forms of social control. The institutionalized rape of Black female slaves by white owners and the exploitation of women's bodies for entertainment resulted in sexualized images of Black women. Collins also emphasizes how popular culture and mass media are used as sources of acknowledgement, but also perpetuates the new racism of recycling derogatory language and oppression and oppressive images of Black women, such as the angry Black woman or the welfare queen. They continue to reduce Black women to untamed sexual beings. Black women emerged from slavery and they encountered a different set of controlling images. Those images are the mammy, the breeder woman, the welfare mother, Jezebel, and the angry Black woman. Understanding the roles of media and media representation is very important for us. Stereotypes are entrenched in media exposure, and these images influence how one perceives and interacts with Black women. In response to misrepresentation, Black women are constantly shifting the emotional, taxing, psychological process of change. Or they're altering their speech, or they're dressing a certain way to placate society and even sometimes our own communities of color. So now back to you, Ms. Vanessa.
All right, so the first question I'd like to start us off with, ladies, is this one. When you see images of Black women in popular cultures and mass media, are these tools being used as a source to perpetuate racism, justification of sexual assault, objectivity of women? What are your thoughts, ladies? Who would like to go first?
Well, I'll go first, but in response to that question, absolutely, they are, because media is a socializing agent, the same way that family, education, our peers, and other socializing institutions teach us and shape and reflect our values. So because America is a mediated culture, meaning that media both reflects and shapes, our values, attitudes, and beliefs, the fact that we see these types of negative images tells us that it's reflecting society. So these images don't come out of nowhere. They come from the ideology that is already put in place. So, all of the images that we grew up with, you become inundated with it, and it shapes your belief about yourself and what other people think about you. So absolutely, have to say yes, I agree.
Okay. Um, who's next? Everybody's shaking their heads. I know everybody has something to say. Who's next? Delia, what do you think?
Well, I think if drawing on that comment, what I was thinking about is how the um, images grow and morph over time. So in a piece that I co-authored with a professor, we used the title Sapphires Gone Wild, the notion of the ways in which a historic trope of the sapphire, the sassy, angry Black woman has been reimagined in reality television. And so that while we are balancing competing interests of, yes, we want African American women, Black women to be featured in television, we want that representation, we are still conflicted with what type of representation that is. And we really see reality television as a real double-edged sword. It's great to have the representation, it's great to have the economic progress, but at what cost?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Latoya, what are your thoughts?
I was thinking about the question, in terms of what do we see in popular culture, and I was like, okay, here's where sometimes I'm at a disadvantage because I'm not watching television, but I am thinking about the images of what we see, and this would be like a totally way off the wall example, but I'm a big animation fan. So I like to watch cartoons that are made for adults. But every time I watch those kinds of media, um, the most clear example I could think of is a cartoon about reality television. So it's called Total Drama Island. And on Total Drama Island, first season, it is just like reality TV, except it's all animated characters. But the only Black representation in Total Drama Island is a sassy Black female, you know? So she doesn't win the reality contest and win the money or anything like that, but she has all of the stereotypical uh, responses that a Black woman would have with the head rolls and the way she says her language and the way she uses her hands. And really just kind of thinking about that, um, I don't think the gay, lesbian, bisexual community would say they stole or they try to copy Black women, but that's what they do. So it's like if they want to be fierce, they're using all of these stereotypical things that represent the sassiness that Black women have and how they kind of clap back, when people have things to say. So I would definitely say it's pervasive in terms of how narrow people view Black women, that you can walk into a room and if you're in the middle of a debate, they're looking at you, if not directly, indirectly, just to see if you're going to give them the attitude and things like that. So that's, I definitely think it's pervasive in our pop culture.
Okay. And I'm getting ready to call another panelist, but before I do, in case anyone has just joined us, currently we are answering the question in regards to, do images of Black women in popular culture as well as mass media perpetuate racism, objectification of sexual assault, and just the idea of maybe not the positive image of Black women? And so with that question said, we're going to continue with our panel. I'm going to go to Claudette. What are your thoughts, Claudette?
Thank you. I absolutely agree that it's definitely personified in our culture. I think it really shapes. I agree with what Jonafa was saying earlier about how it's a reflection of our society, but I also believe that it has more of an influence on our society. And just to tie into what Ms. Latoya was saying, I recall I'm a 90s kid, so I grew up in the 90s, when hip hop came out, and this is a new genre, this rap, this new hip hop. And I remember how the media back then, we were watching BET, if anybody remember that, the videos, and how the young ladies looked on the videos and the words that the rappers would use in their rap to almost make you want to be like this person, so when you're talking about the how Black women have been sexualized, right? I just recall the young ladies would always have on something very tight fitting. Back then, there was the mini skirts, the skin tight dress, and the fishnets. There was a song about that back in the day, the fishnet pantyhose.
Fishnet black pantyhose, yes.
That's the time, Lord's Day and the time.
Amen.
Legs.
And I remember, I literally remember wanting to be, personified in that way, because it seemed like the cool thing to do. It seemed like, oh, that's how you get a man to notice you, and and I literally came to a point in my life where I felt like, well, that's all I am. I'm just a sexual object for a man, and so I needed to dress in a certain way or act in a certain way. I love the way Latoya was saying with the hair thing, and I still have a little bit of that in me, but I remember practicing to be a certain way because, number one, I either wanted to look sexy and beautiful, or I needed to be tough. It depended on what setting I was in. I don't want anybody to run over me or to think I'm weak. And I grew up in urban America. So you needed to be tough. So if you weren't being sexy, then you needed to be coming off where you're wearing the cross colors and, the jumpsuit, and you coming off like T-Boz or something, so that you can look tough. So you kind of had a couple of options there, but those images came to me through media, through what I saw on those videos. So I absolutely agree. I agree with that. Mm-hmm.
What do y'all think about Queen Latifah as the equalizer? Have you seen her?
That's quite a different change of the Black woman perspective, because now she's the heroine. She's she's going to be the person who's going to make wrong right and that kind of thing. So that's very interesting that you bring that up. Queverra, tell me your thoughts.
I agree with all the panelists, and I think it has changed the way we value ourselves and how we see ourselves. because society has set a price tag on our value and our worth, and they have defined it. And I think the challenge as a Black woman is to redefine my value and my worth, not according to what I see or what I experience. And it's not just me redefining my value and my worth for myself, but it's redefining my value and my worth for everyone that I come encounter with. Because the expectation of everyone that I come encounter with is the same expectation that has been set according to the media. So when people approach me, they're approaching me with their own predetermined predetermination of who I am and what I'm worth. And so I see this as a fight, and even as a fight of being in a master's program. Before I went into a doctorate program, I was the only one there that looked like me. And I had to prove that I was there. I had to prove that I was smart enough. And I even began to have these private conversations with myself, asking, am I smart enough? Because society says I'm not. And so it is a tug of war of realities and truths. And I think the challenge and the mission moving forward to get past what the media says we are and how the media says we're valued is going to be conquering that tug of war in our own minds and changing the narrative. And sometimes changing the narrative is individual by individual, because I don't know about you all, but it happens in every encounter. They come with these predeterminations of what I can do. And, I had one professor tell me, you don't belong in graduate school. And I swallowed that because I thought I had to. And I want young women that look like me to understand you no longer have to accept what the media and society says we are, because we are valuable, we are worth it, and we can do it.
Okay, thank you.
Beautiful. That was beautiful. Beautiful.
Ramika, tell me your thoughts.
Oh my goodness, every thought I have, I can say amen to every panelist that have spoken thus far, first and foremost. For me, my thoughts are familiar in the sense that the myth of the strong Black woman was, I felt like was oppressed or suppressed upon me by my family. Being homeless, being the oldest girl in the family, there was a lot of responsibility that was told to me that I had to take upon, with a lot of fighting behind it. And also, too, the sexual abuse that happens in the Black families, that they tell you that you're not supposed to tell other people about what happens here stays here. And that's another myth as well, because how am I supposed to be strong, whole, and do all these things that you're telling me I need to do, juggle all these balls and everything that you're telling me I need to do? But by the same token, I can't talk to anyone. So for me, just being able to acknowledge the fact that in families, this stuff happens, but also to talk about it and not allow, shows like old shows like Good Times or whatever, where, you just got to go with the bad times or go with the system or whatever the case may be. But like, I think it was Latonya that talked about the Equalizer and the Queen Latifah. So just me personally embodying the fact that I don't have to live up to my family or society's desires for me, demand of me, or anything like that, because I get to define what the myth of my strong Blackness means.
Okay, thank you. Miss Sandra, your thoughts? You're on mute. There you go.
Well, okay. I was just going to say that it seems to me that all of the leading ladies I see on the TV programs that I don't really watch, or I just see commercials, are they're judges, they're the enforcer lady, they're crime people. They're, at least there's a broader variety of what they can be now on the screen than, you know, Pam Greer's roles. And you know, my Guatemalan husband, you know, knew about Pam Greer. So, but I was also thinking that me being a very light-skinned woman, I feel like sometimes in the community, I have to take on these roles, these kind of stereotypical kind of code switching mask roles, so that I recognized or relatable to or something. So that's kind of been more a little bit of my experience too. It's just that I find that I was in the ballet world and there weren't very many people of color, but the other that were there, we had our own kind of way of talking to each other and processing what was going on with each other than other people. And they would see that. And I think it was probably a more stereotypical or way of talking with each other, like, hey girl, how you doing? You know, like kind of familiar. And then, but what that did was that kind of allowed other people to look at that and say, oh, I can use that familiarity too. And that's where you kind of run into, no, you can't call me the N-word, even if we call each other the N-word, or, which I never did, but, you know, just that kind of familiarity. And also I was listening to a woman who was speaking yesterday from Texas State about teaching while Black. And she's saying, you know, how students will come up and, you know, will call all the other people Professor this, but try to be calling her by her first name and not being respectful. So I think, you know, when you see that on these TV shows like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, or, you know, that's what I grew up around, you know, and the Bill Cosby show, you know, all the ways of we've assimilated into the culture and how kind of Fresh Air Prince kind of showed these different kinds of Black people, so to speak. Actually, yeah, the women were always kind of the ones that, you know, confided or was in, or they were the ones that were, you know, the moral fiber of the situation. They were very seldom the vulnerable ones. So I don't know, I think that somehow those stereotypes of the strong Black woman have still kind of stayed intact, even with the ones that are in the media today.
Okay. As I listened to you all, a couple of things came to mind, and the first thing I thought about was the first time I was told by a teacher that I shouldn't be taking a certain course. It was in high school. It was 11th grade. And the chemistry teacher told me that I had no business being in a chemistry class, which I find quite hilarious now that I'm a scientist engineer. And I didn't know how to react to that. And what was worse is I didn't know who to go tell that she told me that. I told my mother, and my mother was a nurse, so she had some degree, and she says, well, just, you know, just go knock her socks off because I know how smart you are, and that'll just show her. And it wasn't until I went back to my high school some 10 years, oh gosh, maybe 20 years later, something like that, to do a presentation for all the teachers in the district because I was now working for the State Department. And this teacher was sitting in the audience, and I walked up to her and said, I remember when you told me I shouldn't be in this chemistry class because I wasn't going to do well. And she said, oh, I don't remember that. And the teacher behind her, who was a big mentor of mine, who was also an Anglo lady, said, I remember when you told her that because I think I told her about it. And she all she could tell me to do, well, just prove her wrong, that kind of thing. You know, the other thing I was thinking about too was that as we were talking about people who we've seen on TV in the past, you remember there was Claire Huxtable, right? She was the lady at the time. She was a lawyer. She was smart. She always had something great to say. So if you were watching the Cosby Show, she was like our role model. And then Aunt Vi on Fresh Prince, she was also a lawyer. And there was actually an episode where she was on Meet the Nation or something like that. And the white men were saying to her, well, when we want the Black perspective, we'll talk to you. And that wasn't the good thing to tell her. And then the last person I thought about who was probably in one of the roles most important, who I felt always had to be careful of what she said and did, was Michelle Obama, because they were expecting her to be the angry Black woman. And that woman had more grace or poise than anybody I've ever seen in my life. And as smart as she was. And so I don't know if people even paid attention to that, because when you're not acting like the angry Black woman, then you don't get any attention. But when you do, then everybody's listening and everybody is trying to adapt to what you're saying for the most part. But I want to kind of end on this before we go to the next question. And that is, I always had issues in trying to see women like me in the movies. I didn't think I connected to anybody. And it wasn't until Hidden Figures came out that I saw scientists, engineers, people who do things that I do, that I was like, finally, there's somebody on there who does stuff that I do, because I didn't even bother explaining it. Why bother? Nobody would get it anyway. And that was my first experience. And that wasn't a very long time ago, mind you. And so I want you to also think about, at what point did you see someone on TV, let's say TV, and then do any of the other medias that you could relate to, and say, okay, now that's somebody that's I can connect with. Think about that for a minute, and maybe just one or two of you give us an example of someone that you may have seen that you made that connection with.
Well, actually, I want to respond a little bit in opposition, because I think one of my biggest childhood memories, and I had to be less than 7 because my grandmother passed when I was 7. And so that's when Elizabeth Taylor was playing Cleopatra. But even at that age, I knew, but Cleopatra is Black.
Yeah. Yeah.
No one told me that. When I reflect on that, I'm like, but it's Africa, she's Black. And so I watched it or whatever. But to me, she was playing a role that really truly wasn't who she was. Mm-hmm. And that was just like I said, as an elementary kid that I thought.
That's a very good point. I forgot about that one. A very good point to bring. Anybody else want to share with us before we move on to the next question?
I don't know if it was a TV show, but my mom thought I was pretty weird because I would imitate Oprah Winfrey and Barbara Jordan. Okay. And so I thought some days I was Barbara Jordan and some days I thought I was Oprah, because they had this countenance that wherever they went, it didn't matter what they went through or what they walked through. They were always overcoming their challenges and sharing how they overcame their challenges. And so I wanted to be them. Like, I really wanted to be them.
Okay.
I want to say something.
Tyson. Oh, I'm sorry.
Who said I wanted to say something? I
did, but go ahead.
No.
Oh, I mean, who could ever forget the late, great Cicely Tyson?
Yes.
I mean, growing up watching her movies, Miss Jane Pittman, when we were young, me and my sisters could quote lines from Miss Jane Pittman. I just watched it over again. I'm like, oh God. And she was always a woman that was full of grace. And it's like she intentionally took on roles that exemplified the dignity of Black women. Even if she was assigned a role that might fit into some of the tropes, the presence that she brought to it and the way she carried herself, outside of that, before the age of social media and bad publicity is good publicity, she never bought into that. Maya Angelou, I was able to meet her and take a picture with Maya Angelou. So, those were my role models growing up, like Maya Angelou and Cicely Tyson, and even Aretha Franklin, because my mom was a big fan of Aretha Franklin. And she's been in, the White House in and out of her lifetime, the late Aretha Franklin. So those were my role models, positive ones.
Okay, good deal.
I just wanted to say something. it might be my age because I am older, but when I was growing up, I was living in California, and we lived in a really culturally mixed neighborhood. And I didn't see anybody that looked like me as far as on TV, and it wasn't until much later that I even understood my own identity, because I was brought up being patriotic first and then God. And so when it came to looking at TV, I was looking at, what is that, Lost in Space, or, nothing but white people, on TV. So I didn't have that role model like to aspire to. And then when I went to school, I didn't hear any information about my race. And that was in California. And it wasn't until like the 1960s, I wasn't there in 1960s in California, in San Diego, that all this rioting started happening, and my neighborhood changed, but I didn't understand what was going on because I was so young. And I feel that a lot of people who are not raised to really identify and understand who they are will be like me, and having to have that quest to kind of find out who am I as a woman, but also my race. Because the only thing I heard was that, people who were in slavery, they were docile and they never did protest or they never did fight back, which is a lie, but it was almost as if to make it like, we're not even for me, it was like I wasn't even a part of the United States in a way, we're just an aside thing. And it wasn't until I, started wondering more about why am I treated the way I am, because I'm a darker skinned sister. I love my color now, but it was a time that people treated me differently because of my color. And not only from the outside community, but from the inside of the community as well. And, we have to talk about the colorism that goes on as well. And it wasn't until much later in my years of trying to find my identity and my quest of knowing more about my own history that I became more proud of who I am. And then the struggles of what Black women especially have to go through, because I was socialized at 10 years old to take care of a household. So that adultification of Black girls start very, very early.
There's no girlhood.
And so that you're socialized to take care of everyone else but yourself. And then there's the sexual part that happens to you, like I think Ramika was talking about, but nobody talks about, which is why I named this Breaking the Silence in the Black community, because that goes on. And so think about all the weight of what Black women encounter on a daily basis, not only within their community, but outside of their community. And no wonder we have mental health problems. And, no wonder we have health problems. No wonder, we have all these things that are happening to us because we don't acknowledge it and we don't talk about it. And so for me, it's very freeing that I have been able to really understand who I am as a woman, and understand that I don't have to do what society is telling me to do. Or I've been called a woman who emasculates Black men because I open up my mouth and speak my truth. Or I have been, some men try to sexualize me, as being the Jezebel. So these are things that are very, very much a part of why I wanted to have this, to come together to talk about. These are all myths. And then the strong Black woman is in the center of saying, I can withhold and take everything, everything. But yet inside, there's all types of psychological things that are happening to them, or the abuse, so that I can keep my family together. All of those things are happening. So I just wanted to make those comments as well.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to our next question. and excuse me, I'm going to kick it off because I want you guys to be able to think for a minute and be able to share. So we're all from different professions, our panel. We're in various aspects of careers and doing different kinds of things. I want you to think about a story in your specific career where the stereotype played a part in something that was either um, negative or didn't didn't go in a positive light because of what they expected of you. And one of our panelists said earlier that, you know, there's things that are expected of us, and we had to do something different. We had to behave in a certain way because of what was expected. So I want everybody to tell a story from their field. And I mean, we have a realtor, we have a pastor, we have we've got different folks on that are going to tell you a story, and I want you to listen for the strand of familiarity through the story. So I'm going to start with mine. So it was probably about 10 years ago, and as I've told you, I've worked in the science and engineering field for many, many years now. And back when I was in Fort Worth, the Dallas Fort Worth area, I was helping with a an engineering project that evolved around a um, a radar. It was a radar that was designed to be in airports, a Doppler radar. It was designed to be in airports, and it was to detect wind shear. And the reason why it became so popular, because back in about 1985, six or something like that, there was a huge plane crash at DFW. And it was a plane crash full of people who were coming into the DFW area. And wind shear caused the plane to crash in the middle of a highway. Everybody on the plane was killed. Uh, People on the highway were killed. It was horrible. It was an American Airlines, and so a lot came because of that. But one of the big things scientifically was it was this idea of wind shear that could literally knock a plane like you're slapping a fly. And so something had to be done to be able to detect that. And so I was on a team that was working with this idea of figuring out how to be able to detect that early. And so ultimately, a Doppler radar came out, and this was a huge thing. It looks like a big satellite and uh, um, device, and it was in the middle of the airport. And they first put it in a couple of airports, the Dallas area, Portland, and there was one other place. I was flying into Portland and going to a science conference, mind you, and on the shuttle there were five of us. There were two men in front of me and two ladies behind me, and I was in the middle of the seat. And one gentleman said to the other gentleman, he said, "What is that big old thing over there?" As we were coming out the airport. And I said, "Oh, that's the new Doppler radar. It's there to detect wind shear because of the issues they've been having with it on planes." And the one guy looked at the other guy and he said, She don't know what she's talking about." I didn't say a word. And as we were leaving the airport, the guy driving the shuttle got on the microphone and said, "By the way, folks, just wondered if you were wondering what that big white thing was to the left of us. That's the new Doppler radar that is now being put in airports to help to detect wind shear." Okay, those two guys did not turn around and look at me. They looked straight ahead for the rest of that trip. And the two ladies behind me said, "You go, girl." I didn't say a word. And I think the best part of it was the next morning when I went to do my workshop at the conference, those two guys were sitting in the front seat. And I walked up to them and said, "Hi, how y'all doing?" And went up on stage to do my presentation. So they expected nothing of me, no matter that I was trying to explain to them what was going on, but they assumed that I was this black chick in the middle seat who didn't know what she was talking about. And they, of course, did because, you know, they were scientists. And I've always told that story because you don't know what to expect of people and you have no idea who they are or what they're capable of. Make assumptions of nothing or no one. So that's my story, being in the science engineering field. Who's going next with your story?
I'll go ahead and go next since I'm co-host. Mine is short and sweet. So I have just retired from Texas State University. I was there 24 years, and I was the assistant director for student diversity and inclusion. They've changed their name since then, but that's what it was when I was there. But anyway, one day I went to HR and I was inquiring about my benefits. I was dressed professionally as an assistant director would. And the woman behind the counter said, "Are you a custodian?" And I looked at her and I didn't get mad. I just said, "No, I'm the assistant director for student diversity and inclusion." But it's funny how just because I was a Black person, that she just naturally assumed that I was a custodian at Texas State when I have 4 degrees, you know, but it's that stereotype that about Blacks and Black women, that there's no way in the world you could be an administrator, you know, you have to be a custodian. In the meantime, she just turned blood red, you know, and tried to apologize. And I said, "That's okay." And I just kept going because I know it ate her up because she had said that remark. But those are the assumptions that people can make. No matter what you're wearing, it can happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, who's next?
I'll go next. Being a realtor here in San Marcos, next month will be 6 years now. Getting started was definitely very difficult because of the Good Old Boys Club. And me being one of the first African-American realtors in San Marcos as well. One situation in particular, I remember when I first, maybe a year into being a realtor, had been invited to a new build conference. And it was, you know, put on by new builders to let us know about what their products are or whatever. And I walked in a room, and this time, for whatever reason, I really realized I was the only one in the room. And the reason why I realized it, because sometimes I walk in a room, you know me, I'm happy-go-lucky, I skip and hop and all that stuff. But this time I realized it because of the atmosphere. It was a bunch of mature, elderly white women that was in there, and maybe one white guy. And when I walked in, it was like the heaviness of a cloud, a dark cloud just came upon me, where no one said it, but everyone acted, well, first looked it, but also acted by not engaging in any type of conversation or anything with me, shunned me for being an African-American realtor here in San Marcos. So for me, I do have that memory, and it empowers me too. Sometimes it does discourage me too, because I feel like, and I say this humbly as possible, I feel like because I'm African-American, I am not making as much money in real estate as my counterparts, even some of those who just started in real estate. And I have been told by other, you know, numerous people, they love me, they love my personality, but they're going to use someone else who's white because of the history there, instead of opening up to having maybe a new dialogue or new interaction, engagement, transaction, or whatever. You know, so I've been told that numerous times. You know, Ramika, I love you. I think you're a great person, but I'm gonna stick with my white experience, older, whatever word they want to use to justify being racist.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Interesting. Who's next?
I'll go next.
Okay.
So I'm a pastor, so of course I'm in a very male-dominated field, even though the church and the pews are filled with women, and women are the reason why the doors of the church stay open, and it has continued. But leadership has always been decidedly male. So, I mean, I have a number of stories, but I'll just share one. I had a friend who my husband and I have known for years, and he was starting out in ministry, and he was attending a church, and he really liked the church. He really liked the pastor, and he was really excited about, you know, me and my husband meeting his pastor. And I was like, okay, you know, I wasn't really sure why he wanted us to meet him, but sometimes when you go into a new experience, you want, you know, that experience to say, hey, you know, do you like that person or whatever. So we decided to go to a church service. He invited us one afternoon to a church service, and as soon as church was over, he made a beeline path to us, and he wanted me to meet him first, because we were both ministers. And when he was introducing me to his pastor never looked me in the eye. He never gave me eye contact. And then when he shook my hand, he gave me the old wet fish. He never gripped my hand. He never gave me a firm handshake, and he never made eye contact. So I was like, okay. So then fast forward a few months later, I was given an invitation to preach at another church in a different city. But I saw him there. This pastor actually was sitting there on the front row, and he realized that I was the one that was actually bringing the word that evening. And I just, presented the word. I preached. I was myself. I let God use me. And as soon as I sat down and church was over, he was the first person that was holding up the rest of the people that wanted to have something to share and say and speak to me about the scripture, the text, the approach that I use, the hermeneutics, the homiletics. He wanted to have a full-blown conversation. It wasn't until he saw me operating in my gift that he, just assumed that, oh, she don't know nothing. She ain't gonna say nothing. So that was the assumption, that I experienced. And walking into a room, I've spoken with other pastors on the phone, and then when they meet me in person, they give me the triple take. Oh, you're Pastor Banbury. Oh, like, okay. You sounded so much wiser and older on the phone. Okay, thanks for the backhanded compliment. So, and I, like I said, those are just two short examples, but, it is what it is, and you live another day.
Absolutely. All right, ladies, who's next? We have another great story. Who's doing? Do I need to pick somebody?
I have a story. Who was that?
Who said that? Who said
Latonya.
that? Okay, Latonya, let's hear it.
One of my career choices, which was very brief, was working for a federal congressman, and he had an office in San Marcos. But the Texas District 14 for this U.S. House of Representative Greg Laughlin was around Central Texas and moved all the way down towards Victoria and some parts of the coast. And because it was such a big district, he had 3 different offices. So the San Marcos office had a chance to travel in like Bastrop area and other surrounding areas to talk to his constituents. And Greg Laughlin was elected as a Democrat. And I came to work for him after graduating because it was an available job. And I have a degree in business, but definitely was interested in doing something meaningful. And so because I wasn't going to be working on the campaign, I was like, okay, I could work for Greg Laughlin. And he switched parties. He became a Republican. So I went up into the Bastrop area and talking to his constituents. It's like, I represent the congressman. I'm here, hear your concerns and bring them back to him. And when I stood up and said, I'm Latonya Henry representing Congressman Greg Laughlin, the entire room inhaled. It was like, I was like, oh, yeah, it's me, So, and I was the only Black face in this white room. And they did not talk to me. When I got back to our district office in San Marcos, okay, lights just want to go out. I called the chief of staff in Washington, and I said, Bob, I don't know about me going back out there to Bastrop. These folks gasped. He was like, oh, Latonya, it's because you're so beautiful and you got a great smile. I said, no, Bob, no, Bob. They did not talk to me. So, I remember that very, very vividly in my mind as a working professional, and have several stories just being Black you know, being in a conference with Pastor Jay. You know, I'm just her friend. I'm going down to the laundry room doing laundry, and I'm one of the guests at the hotel, and people are like, "Do you know where the towels are?" And I'm like, no. You know, am I supposed to know where they are? And Jonafa was livid. She was like, "Girl, you should have just," I said, I couldn't go off. I was just kind of like, what?
Shock of such a question, right?
Yeah, yeah. And especially, I think what offended me the most is in telling Jay about it. What offended me the most is because I was there with my phone. I'm, you know, doing stuff on it. So it's like I'm supposed to be working, but I'm sitting here on my phone. So you think I'm the employee around the pool, just sitting around slacking? I was like, yeah, I see. You know, so,
Yeah,
so
I'm like Latonya. Like when people ask me those kinds of questions, or when they ask her those kinds of questions, I don't usually let people off the hook. I say, "Oh, do you know where the towel's at? As a matter of fact, could you point me in the direction of, or could you go back to the back and see if we have any more shampoo? They're out of my favorite shampoo." So when they give me that response back, we look at each other and it's like a aha moment, like, okay, yeah, maybe you won't do that again in the next encounter.
All right. All right. Another story. And I'm loving these stories because look at all the different fields that we're in. And I'm telling you, we're looking at that thread that's maneuvering through the stories, though we're coming from very different perspectives in regards to our backgrounds. Who's next? Who's
I
next?
can go next.
Go ahead, please.
I've been in higher ed over 18 years, but now I just switched to nonprofit. But prior to the switch, I was working at a university in England, and I have been in senior leadership. And I had no idea. I was not only the only woman in my role as the director of learning and teaching, but I was the only Black anything at the table. And so initially sitting at the table, I felt like my mic was silenced. I don't know if you've ever felt that way. Like, even though you're sitting at the table, you still feel silence. You still feel as though, what can I say? And so in that process of sitting at the table, they just kept talking over me. And I thought I had the most brilliant ideas that would just solve their problems. And I just stood up and I just said, "Time out." And I said, "You brought me all the way over here from America to help you. And I have the answer for you. But I need each of you to listen to me because you've been ignoring me for months." And it was so hilarious because after that, they kept giving me the microphone. They kept letting me fix. And it was just me getting outside of myself, but they were really just ignoring me. I would say something, it was like I've never even said a word. And then the men just talk over me. And so I had to learn and find a different kind of strength to use so that I could do what I was there to do in England. And so in England, it's a little different than here. My experiences here, they wouldn't have been as apologetic as they were in England. And that's the difference that I've experienced is in England, once I told them what was happening and what I was experiencing, and what I needed to be able to do to fulfill my role, they apologized. But here in America, there is no apology. There's just learning different ways to navigate the systems, and the good old boy system is everywhere, but in America, it's been a lot tougher to navigate.
We acknowledge some of the comments that are being in the chat. I think there's a good one there right now.
Yes, we're actually one of our someone that's watching, Amanda, is speaking to us from a perspective of being a nurse And she said, I used to honor requests when patients asked for a new nurse simply because I'm Black. But now there isn't another nurse available. So how can I help you? Great point. Great point. Let's see. Okay, that was one that was being said. We've not heard from Miss Sandra. Tell us, in the world of dance, a professional dancer, give us your story. You're on
All
mute.
right. I just got a husband and a dog that just walked in. Yeah, I would just say in the classical ballet world, I was kind of an anomaly. It's the first African-American ballerina in Houston Ballet. So that never really came into play too much because I was so light-skinned. But then there was an incident where the PR department got a call from a reporter in Dallas, Fort Worth, who wanted to talk to some of the Black dancers about how many Black dancers were in the company at the time, because it's actually broke a lot of boundaries in the ballet world, and they're just kind of acknowledging that now, how many people of color they have continued to hire. At that time, there was someone at every level. There was a corps de ballet, soloist, and a principal dancers. So there were about 5 or 6. And that's tremendous, which is really kind of pathetic. That was 25 years ago. It's still very much the same now. Anyway, so this reporter called and the PR person says, oh, you probably want to talk to the one that's more recognizably Black. So Lauren Anderson, the recognizable Black, got the interview. But that reporter called me and said, you need to know how they're talking about you. And at that point, I had some power over what my bio said. So I put it in the bio that I was the first, Black ballerina at Houston Ballet, because a lot of people wouldn't know. And I felt like that's so important. I mean, it's just so important. Representation matters. And earlier question you said was, who did we see in our field? And I got to say, I had a book about a Native American ballerina, and it was beautiful children's book about Maria Talchi. And she and her sister came out of Oklahoma, and there were 2 other ballerinas that were very, very famous in New York at the time I was growing up. And this beautiful book was the children's book, but it was like printed in sepia tones. So she actually was brown, on the page. So, and I just loved that. And so to me, and then of course there was Judith Jameson in Alvin Ailey, and then there was Virginia Johnson in Dancer of Harlem. And then I would just kind of start picking them out when I'd see them in other companies, there'd be one here, one there, for years, and I'll say the other time I had an experience on stage where somebody came in from the outside to set a ballet, and this has been an issue in the ballet world for years. There are certain ballets that they would say everybody has a whitewash for them because we're all supposed to be dead spirits, the Willies, and Giselle, or the Swans and Swan Lakes, because of course all swans are white, right? And so this was called La Sylphide or Les Sylphides, and it was about these sylphs outside, these wood sprites. I'm thinking, how are all these wood sprites so pale? I mean, they're outside all the time. It's just doesn't even make any difference. So anyway, I did what I was told. I pancaked down. I was, this woman comes up to me backstage and says to me, really quietly, you're not as light as all the others. And I said, I know, because I'm Black. But I also have on the same makeup they do. And this must be how Black people look when they're dead or, underground, I guess. I mean, geez. So they're still having issues with that. There was something about someone in Europe, and there's even in Houston Ballet now, there was one little ballerina talking about it, that this Black girl that was saying, I was in tears, and the makeup department came and helped me. And it's like, no, they just need to kind of reassess that stuff. Like, why do we do this? I mean, it's a tradition. But it's the same thing in the theater world. I mean, they darken their skin to become Cleopatra. But, of course, at the time, Houston Ballet also had, Lauren Anderson, who was Cleopatra. And so Black woman, so that was great. But there were many times where they needed slaves, or they needed people from Egypt, or they needed gypsies, and everybody was, these pictures come out and they're all in blackface. And I'm thinking, Lord have mercy, don't put those pictures up on Facebook now. So anyway, that's kind of my deal. And that was one experience where I really felt like the hackles on the back of my neck rose as this woman spoke quietly to me backstage. And I thought, and I don't really know what I said to her. I don't even know if that's really what I said to her, because I was also a union rep. So I was thinking, woman, if you take me out of this part after what you just said, I'm a sue. I'm gonna sue you. I'm gonna play that race card right now. Like, you should have picked a white woman if you thought, if this is supposed to be a white person's role, then you should have made really sure that everybody's bloodline was clean. I mean, what the heck, So anyway, that was just my experience.
Yeah, great.
And I'm gonna have to bow out today. I double booked myself this evening, but that was I'm sorry, that's my contribution.
Appreciate it. Claudia, you're in the tech world. Tell us a story.
Well, in the tech world, I mean, of course, right now, there's challenges, but the story that I'm going to share is from my background in the nonprofit arena, okay. Which I was in for over 15 years before moving into digital marketing and event marketing, which is what I do now. But during my time, I was in leadership at several big nonprofits. And so I got a lot of experience with developing programming, multi-million-dollar programming. And in the last, worked for different organizations such as Catholic Charities and Healthy Families and those types of places. And the last role I was in was at a pioneering homeless campus in San Antonio. And it's called Haven for Hope. I don't mind sharing the name. But wonderful, magnificent place. I loved it, loved every moment that I was there. But however, I was brought on to develop their family services department. And I did that. It was highly successful. All the programming that came in, I brought in parenting programs. I brought in teen programs. I brought in, anti-trafficking programs, just different types of programs and educational things that, that they needed. Something would come up, we needed this. So I would develop the program to address those issues. Well, once that was established, obviously folks could see that I knew what I was talking about. The programs were highly successful. They're still run to this day. And so they moved me to oversee the entire member services is what we called it. So member services department to oversee folks coming in, the intake processes, orientation and things like that. And so I developed this program, which the umbrella program has 6 child programs, if you will, under it. And so we, and I'm sorry, I do get a little bit upset when I talk about angry Black women. I can get angry. But this particular instance, so I was just going to direct these programs. So I created them, established them, set up the proposal, and everything was running great. The pilot was running great. They saw that, and that pilot ran for about 8 months before the board made a decision on it, right? So everything was set, and all this time I'm answering to my superior, who was a white woman, and a consultant that they brought on, which was a white woman as well. And long story short, they decided that they're going to take those programs away from me, that they're going to place somebody else that they deemed more palatable, I would assume, in that position, after I did all the hard work, after I've already demonstrated, what I'm capable of doing. Like I said, these are multi-million-dollar programs. This is not, a reading program that, or, it's not something simple to put together, very, very complex programming. And they literally took that away from me. It took me 3 years to get those programs up and going, successful. Like I said, the pilot on the membership one was 8 months just with the pilot program, and they put somebody there. And so in my experience with that, I know it's a little bit different from what we're talking about, but there's the thread in that is just that, first of all, there's this idea that somebody that looks like me or somebody that talks like me, because I'm gonna share this a little bit, but like I said earlier, I come from an urban background, and I found it very, very challenging when I did undergrad to assimilate to college life, okay? Because I come from the hood. I don't know a better way to say it. I talk like I come from the hood. And I found myself trying to figure out how to be professional. How do you make that transition into the professional world and gain respect? Because people are looking at you like, well, you don't really know what you're talking about because this is the way you string a sentence together. And so you're finding yourself having to redefine what you look like and how you behave and how things come out of your mouth, which sometimes will slow you down because you really have to think about what you're going to say and how you're going to say it. And so I felt like I was at a disadvantage, number one, because of my color, but number two, because of my background, my experience, my upbringing and things like that. So it's just been very, very difficult making those types of transitions. I still find myself making those types of, or encountering those types of instances in this new realm that I know 2020's word was pivot. So when I made that transition to corporate America, as a business owner myself, I'm still finding myself up against some of those obstacles. People not looking at me, taking me seriously, number one. They may underestimate my abilities, number two, and then number three, do they want to work with me because I'm a Black woman? The only thing I think that is playing in my favor right now is that everybody is hyped up about Black women business owners right now. There's a huge push for that. And we talked about how, society plays a role in that right now. I think that that's what's kind of helping to push that along at this moment in time. Chase Bank, a lot of the big corporate banks are backing Black women, Black-owned, women-owned businesses right now. So that's my story.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Delia, we have not heard from you yet.
Okay. I think the experience I want to share is when I was in South Africa in 1996. I had the opportunity to be a visiting professor at the University of the Western Cape. So President Mandela is in office. And I was invited to a community presentation, a Jewish group in Camps Bay, which is one of the swanky suburbs overlooking the ocean. Whenever international visitors came to the university, they were always invited out to this organization to speak. And I remember that the director of the program, I always remember her name, Panna, was Indian. And I think at first Panna hesitated to offer me the invitation, but then she said, well, she's an international visitor. She should be extended the invitation like anyone else. And so I was offered the opportunity, and I was thinking about what I would talk about. And so at the time I had my 7-year-old with me. And I thought instead of talking about my research, I would talk about, maybe acclimating as a parent. But the founder, the director of that organization said, no, we want to hear about your research. So they picked me up, they brought me to the venue, which was a home. And I call this story, The Man That Climbed Mount almost climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, but died because he had to sit beside a Black woman. So I am the guest of honor that night. I am the invited focal point of that event. But there was the gentleman, the elderly gentleman who had gotten to like the next to the last plateau of Mount Kilimanjaro. There was a couple that had made the pilgrimage to Israel, and there was a gentleman who was a French Algerian who had just moved there. So we had these additional speakers. But when I sat down on the couch, the host kept beckoning someone to sit on the couch, and none of them would. So I sat there for some time, and then finally, the elderly gentleman, almost on a cane, finally sat down. And that's when I said to myself, I hope they won't write in the paper tomorrow that this man died because he had to sit beside a Black woman. You know, he's almost climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, so this must be so horrible. And so some of the other indignities that took place that night, and let me back up, I want to go back to Joni's point about being dressed appropriately. I wasn't dressed like Winnie Mandela. I wasn't in my African garb. I remember specifically having on a little Black sweater dress, Black pumps, and the pearls and the bun. You know, I was respectively, dressed. I was appropriately. I didn't come in there mowing, if you will, and but was treated horribly in that sense. I was treated horribly because the wife of the couple that went to Israel purposely was sitting beside me. When she passed the picture, she passed them right over me to someone else. That woman was very thoughtful enough and passed them right back to me. So there was that particular stuff that took place. I had taken a long time to craft my talk about African Americans, and I was very intentional and considerate of giving my talk around African Americans and the Jewish community, since that's who I was speaking to and was able to share with them, that I had been to Dachau, a concentration camp. They heard none of that. When I finished speaking, the only question they had for me was, well, do you think Blacks should be admitted into the university even if they're not qualified? And so that was the only question they had for me that night. Again, it had been so inhospitable that I did not partake of the reception food because, I'm taught, no, I'm not welcome here. I'm not eating your food. And it was capped off by a couple who came up to me and then shared with me their experience of being in the US and like being in New Orleans and feeling unsafe. And so I think there was a sense of like, maybe they could understand how I felt because they had gone to New Orleans and had felt unsafe. And so it was probably one of the most horrific professional experiences I'd ever had in the context of being in South Africa, being in a place where people who look like me and being treated that way, because in that particular moment, I was being treated as a Black, even though depending on whose living room I sat in, I was treated as colored, or I was treated as American, and depending on how I was seen, it dictated my treatment. But that day, they did not see a professor, an equal to be sitting there and having that conversation with them.
Excuse me. Very interesting. Very interesting. I think we can easily see this thread that is moving throughout these stories from very, very different fields, very, very different professions, but that one unique thread that seems to be occurring over and over again throughout our discussions and our stories here. One person said on the chat, it's good to know that I'm not the only one having such an experience. And I think this dialogue allows not only those who never would have thought that we would be in such a position, but those who are experiencing this thinking to themselves, I'm the only one. Because a lot of times that's exactly what happens. We don't share because we're the only one. We're the only person this is happening to. So I'm not going to share with anybody because I don't want to embarrass myself and that kind of thing. And that is not the case at all. I think what brings us back to where I'm going to go here with Jonnie is this idea of the myth of the Black woman, the myth of the strong Black woman, the myth that we have among our society, our own people, our own families, in regards to what we are supposed to deal with, take in, absorb, pass by, etc., as we're trying to do our jobs. Because I heard everybody trying to do their job. Everybody was trying to do their job. And there were issues with you trying to do your job because of you, they didn't expect you to do what you did. They didn't anticipate you doing what you did. They didn't know you could do what you did. Even if they hired you to do it, they still didn't expect you to do it. So it's very, very interesting. And so hopefully the audience is listening to our stories because they can connect. It's happened to them, or they're getting to hear experiences from very bright women from very different fields or highly educated, talking about some of the issues that we're having. And this didn't happen like 30 years ago. This was kind of recent for the most part. So lots of hurdles that we have to overcome and we have to deal with, and just trying to do our job for the most part. So as we go back to this, the myth of the strong Black woman, I want Jonnie to share with us other complexities of this myth of the strong Black woman. And the one I want to bring up is, if in many instances, a Black woman has to deal with domestic violence, how hard that is because of all of the outside entities that surround that. Jonnie, I'm gonna give that to you.
All right. So domestic violence, but also sexual assault, and then the trauma that goes along with it. And that is something that when we start talking about generationally about trauma that has been passed down starting from slavery, we're still feeling the residual effects of that. We also need to look at that as well. But I wanted to share with you, and I've been really open about my own trauma. And that's the only way I can be, is very open. My first traumatic experience as far as sexual abuse started at 4 years old. And it went all the way up until I was in high school, junior high, and also when I was married. I have gone through that. And the thing that the common thread is silence. I never felt like I could ever talk about it with even my parents, from the silent generation that nobody really expressed their feelings or whatever. So, but at 4 years old, I knew I couldn't tell my parents. What is that? That is something that has been passed down from generation to generation. And then also that even if I did feel like that when I was married and I was going through sexual abuse and domestic violence, I was told not to tell anyone outside of the family. What goes on in the family stays in the family. So imagine from 4 years old until I was good and grown and having children, I'm carrying all of that. And it came out, it resulted in me not understanding my identity, what my purpose, who I was as a woman. But not only that, just spiritually, the tearing down of who I am, of not understanding the rights and the privileges I do have, and going through a marriage that was abusive as well, took the icing on the cake. And then I was 22 when my husband left me. I got married at 18. I was pregnant at an early age. Even before I got married, I was pregnant. So I was a teenage mother, and then having 2 other children. And by the age of 22, I was left to fend for myself. And I mean, really fend for myself, because home was not safe for me. My father was an alcoholic, and he was an abuser, an incest abuser as well. I didn't want to go back into that atmosphere, but deciding at that age of 22 that I was going to do it myself. How did I do that? It was because I've been already socialized at 10 to do that kind of work, to be able to take care of people, take care of kids. It's because I was socialized. But on the inside of me, I had all of these things that were happening to me psychologically, you know, and physically, you know, there comes the blood pressure problems, you know, and then having a stroke in 2001, where I had to learn how to do everything over again. Everything, and I mean everything, even from walking to talking, to eating, to driving, to take care of myself. And all of that is because I was carrying all of this load of being this strong Black woman with me, because that's the way I was socialized. And in a lot of communities, you will see the same thing, where women are socialized at a very young age to be silent. And it wasn't until much later, I'm 62 now, that I have found my voice, that I will speak up, and I will not allow those type of people to kind of sequester me, but also drown. It was almost like I was drowning, you know, but it came through a lot of counseling, you know, learning more about myself as my identity. That's why I have 2 degrees in history. It was because I was trying to find myself, and then, you know, learning feminist theory, learning all about who I was as a woman. I was fortunate that I was able to do that. I found myself at age 22 in the projects, okay, with my 3 kids. And my kids were 5, 3, and 1. And all I had was a high school diploma. I was fortunate enough to understand that the only way that I was going to be an example to my children is I was going to have to do something and not stay in that. Because, you know, I could see in that certain projects I was staying, or housing development, generationally, that was the hold on their lives. Not only it was sexually, you know, that racial generational, I say a curse, but also it was that sexual thing where things were happening. People were getting raped. People were holding, you know, incest. And I wanted something better for my children, you know. I didn't know what that looked like, but I knew that's what I was not called to be, in that place. But it took me a long time to get there. And I think so much about other women, Black women, who are still in that. I went to a conference one time in Chicago, and it was a woman that was talking about, she's from Chicago, about her research on sexual violence against Black women. And she was talking about, in certain places in Chicago, children at 10 years old were getting pregnant. Young girls were getting pregnant, and they weren't getting pregnant by a stranger. They were getting pregnant by the uncles, or, you know, brother, or somebody like that. That is so prevalent, not just in our community, but other communities as well. And that's why it's so important for us as Black women, wherever we work, whatever profession we have, is to speak up about that and say, there is something out there better for you. You can do better, you know, but they may need your help and guidance to get there. You know, I was just fortunate to be able to get out of that situation, but there's so many people that are still in that situation, because it is a generational curse. And it is also, there's a lot of sexual trauma that has gone on from generation to generation, that it's almost as if it's okay to have the uncle to mess with you, you know, and girl, you better not say anything about it, you know, because the distrust of the institutions that we have in the United States is one of the major reasons why Black people don't want to say anything, because the first thing happens is that their family is torn apart, or, you know, or they're misdiagnosed, or there's so many things. But I still have hope. That's why I went back to school at my age, because I'm 62, and got this degree in counseling, because I just believe there is hope. There's still work for all of us to do. And that's why it's so important to have this conversation about this myth, because it is a myth, because inside we break down. And if we can't show the vulnerability that we need somebody's help, We will continue to have health problems. I was reading one statistics where it said, when it comes to high blood pressure, 60% of Black women have it versus 30% males. What is that saying? What is that saying? If 60% of the Black population of women have it and only 30% of males, that is something to think about. That we're carrying too much and not allowing ourselves to be vulnerable and leaning on a sisterhood. If y'all notice, every time I addressed you, when I was emailing you, I said my sisters, because you are my sisters. You are my sisters. So I didn't mean to say all of that, but I just wanted you to know. And then the next time when we meet again, and which will be on March the 16th at 5 o'clock, we will talk about what's wrong with having that social construct of the strong Black woman. What does it lead to? I did allude to that, some of that just today, and I just said some things, but that's what we'll be talking about, because we need to tear that down, you know, because so many people have internalized that because it's been told that that's who we are. But we don't have to accept what is told to us. So back to you, my co-host.
Thank you for sharing that with us. And I think the more opportunities we have to get together in forums to have such discussions and listen to stories where it's not a surprising story. And some of us, if it's not us, it's someone we know. I often heard that one in three girls have been sexually assaulted, or sexually attacked, or in some kind of way there's been an interaction. One in three girls. So if there's 9 of us here, that's 3 of us, right? That's how close it is. So, but the idea of having a discussion in regards to how do we deal with this. We all know that in the Black community specifically, not just ours, but more in ours, that this idea of seeking help from a mental perspective is a taboo. It is not something we should do, right? You don't go tell other people your business, right? I don't care what it is. And again, it doesn't have to be a physical act. It could be the mental perspective. It could be too much stress at work, whatever it happens to be. We keep that to ourselves, and you keep it moving, sister. You keep it moving. And
Pray about it.
yeah, pray it. Yeah, absolutely. And so as I hope that our audience is listening to us, that they can connect in some way. It might not be you, but it's someone real close to you. And what needs to be done to get that particular person to seek help in some way, in some form, to be able to deal with some of the things that are happening. And it's internal. So it starts off as stress, and then it becomes, as Joni was saying, high blood pressure, and then it becomes a heart attack, or it becomes this, or it becomes that. And remember, the strong Black woman keeps the family and keeps the house moving. What happens when that falls? What happens to everything from that standpoint? So it is not just about, these women are being selfish, just talking about themselves. We're the arch and the block. And if something happens to that block, what happens to everything else? But we have to get out of this issue that you don't say anything. You just keep it to yourself. You just deal with it, because that's not how we're going to be able to fix things that we need. One of the things I just recently read was the high rate of deaths of Black women in childbirth. How high? Like in this day and time, what? what do you mean? And this one particular thing I was looking at, it was like how women were going in telling their doctors about issues that they were having, and they were just being ignored. Oh, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. Don't worry about it. You're a strong girl. You can handle that. That's not going to be anything. And at the end, we have babies with no mothers because of that. But I know I'm going into a whole nother subject now. But again, I think there's a connection there. There's a connection there overall. So who else would like to say something for us before we start? Are we getting ready to wrap it up? Is it that time, Joni? Where are we on time?
It's 15 till.
Okay.
It's 15 till.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's about time.
About time. Okay.
Anybody who has something to say can say something.
Yeah, I would like a few closing words from some of our panelists, please.
I'll start first. First and foremost, I want to thank you, Joni, for sharing your story. I've heard bits and pieces of it over the years that I've known you, but to hear it in its entirety, I thank you for it because, one, it empowers me. Similar story, background, and et cetera, coming up. And it gives me the strength to talk about it. I talk about it one-on-one with others, but it gives me the strength to talk about it on another platform. So thank you for sharing. And I also just want to just thank all of you wonderful ladies who, gosh, I mean, we've met a couple of times and we've talked a couple of times. And each time I just get more and more excited to be a part of this group, to hear the triumph, the victory. I mean, just everything that you guys have gone through and still continue to thrive and smile and be beautiful. So I just want to say thank you for who you are and thank you for who and what you do.
Thank you, Ramika. All right. Another closing word, please, from one of our panelists.
Well, I'll go. It's been really beautiful to be here tonight. And I've known Joni a long time, as I'm sure some of you all have. But I think it's going to be a really great opportunity for us to continue the dialogue and also give the audience opportunities to get the resources and the help and to understand. I couldn't be moved by Joni's pointing out about how, as young girls, we really don't have our childhood. And I think we forget that the children were the shock troops of the civil rights movement and the women, and the fact that we don't really get to have a girlhood, and that's where it all began. So I'm excited that we're doing this and that we're going to continue that dialogue.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Read some of the comments that we've been receiving. There's some thank yous.
There are, let's see. Thanks to all of you for sharing. That came from Shirley. Thanks to each of you. I look forward to hearing the next panel. That's from Marla. Thanks for, let me see, thank all of you for sharing your stories. That's from Donna. And that's pretty much it. We had a lot.
Marla is the executive director of HCWC. So I'm so excited to have her online.
Marla? All right. And let's see. We really appreciate those of you who are sharing some of your thoughts with us when we were talking about different women who were positive role models. There were a lot of names that popped up. Some of them we said, one that popped up that we didn't mention was Angela Davis. I thought that was interesting because she was a bad girl.
She's still bad. She's still running it. She's running the show.
That's not what you want to grow up to be, you know. Hearing that one. Wasn't anybody Black that told me that, by the way. But so there are lists of women on here who have made contributions in a positive manner to us over the years that we've grown up, and you know, to some degree outside of the entertainment world. And this has been the month during Black History Month. If you've looked at the city of Kyle, the city of Buda, some of these other places, AARP, where they've highlighted women of color, African-American women, and the contributions that they've made to society in various areas of science and politics and those kinds of things like that. So there's lots of role models out there. And I think during Black History Month, the opportunity for us to, these women to come forth, as well as African-American men, for us to be able to pinpoint to people. For some, I always love it when someone says to me, I had no idea. Like Shirley Jackson, she developed a cell phone. What? A Black woman developed a cell phone? Uh-huh. Yeah. And it gets better than that. And so the opportunity for our young people to see not only what we've done, but to see what they can do in the future, because I think we're going with that. So I want to thank everybody for participating. The stories were great. The conversation was great. I know we have another topic the next time. Ms. Jonnie, thank you for putting us all together. I look forward to the next one, and I'm going to let you close it out for us.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Yes, you were a co-host. I want to thank my panel. I want to thank Kiera Nicholson, because she's been behind the scenes and helping us with our technology. So I do appreciate you. And I appreciate everyone who was here. And I want to say, just ask other people to come, because I think this is it's excellent, but it's also something that we need to talk more about and need to get the word out about this, because there are so many people who are suffering, Black women especially, who are suffering in silence. And we have the power, and we have the education and the knowledge to be able to help. So if I can say anything else, is please help. Please help our people who are suffering in silence. And the last thing, again, is that we have two more, one in March and one in April. Next month, it will be on the 16th at 5 o'clock on Zoom again. And we're going to be breaking down this myth in the context of saying, okay, something is wrong with having this. What are some of the problems or the issues that come along with being the strong Black woman? One of them that I really want us to talk about is vulnerability, because that is something that I know I need to work on it still myself. I'm a work in progress. I will admit that, but we do need each other in our communities. We do need to help. So I'm through. I'm excited. I'm glad everybody who came there's still another comment that said they learned so much today. So that was from July. And she appreciates each of you for sharing your stories. So I wanted you all to know that people are listening and they are thanking us. So thank you. And I hope everyone have a good night.
I think you said it was the 16th, but it's Friday the 19th.
I mean, Friday the 19th. I'm sorry, the 19th. So Friday the 19th, excuse me, is the next one. So mark your calendars.
Okay. All right.
Thank you and good night.
Night.